What's up, everybody? It is time for the very last episode in the Return of the King for the Mondays in Middle Earth. We've been doing this series, since I can't remember now, April of last year or something like that, April 2022. We're now in June of 2023, and we started with The Hobbit. We went through the Fellowship, the Two Towers, Return of the King. We've been working our way through the Appendices recently, working our way towards the Silmarillion, and we are almost there. Today is the very last episode of the Appendices. And we're going to be covering the languages and people of the Third Age. Specifically, though, we're going to be covering the peoples of the Third Age because I'm not going to get into the language stuff. That's not what this channel is about. We've been mostly focused on the lore and the history and everything else. And of course, a lot of this stuff is going to be covered in greater detail in the Silmarillion. So this is just sort of going to be like an appetizer, a teaser. So hopefully you're ready to dive in. If this is your first time tuning in, I got bedhead, bedbeard. I'm recording this on Sunday morning like I usually do for the Monday episode. Um, my cats are playing in the box down below me. We got Amazon deliveries yesterday, so Chris cut some holes in the boxes. And so if you hear some weird noises, it's because the cats are going crazy with the boxes. Um, anyway, we're going to get into the peoples of Middle Earth today, wrap up the appendices, and go from here into the Silmarillion. There might be a little bit of a break between now and the Silmarillion. I might take a couple weeks off. I haven't decided yet. I'll make that decision later and give you an update if I am going to take it off. But these episodes usually air on Monday mornings at like around 9 or 10 a.m. Central Time. And we've been going on for a ton of episodes now, 60 episodes, something like that. So, without further ado, this starts off with Of the Elves. All right, don't forget, like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. And let's dive in. So, it says here that the elves became divided in the Elder Days between the Western and the Eastern. West elves being known as the Eldar, and the Eastern branch settling in Mirkwood and Lorien. It says their languages don't appear in this history, but of the Eldarin tongues, there are the Kenya and the Sindarin. Hey, guys, come on. Now I've got cats getting up on the bed underneath the sheets. Hold up. All right, guys, sorry about that. She jumped up. She was getting underneath the sheets onto the mattress, and I don't want her to do that because they claw the mattress. But she's a little scared right now because my niece is over here, and so her and her brother are just like running around, being scared and playing with the boxes. So say here, the language of the Kenya was the language of the Eldar who did not pass over the sea but lingered on the coasts in Beleriand, where Thingol Greycloak was their king, and they became known as the... No, this is a different group. The exiles, who were more numerous, adopted the Sindarin for daily use. Hence, it was the tongue of all the elves and elf lords that appear in this history. Okay. Those were the Eldarin. Noblest of all was Lady Galadriel, of course, of the royal house of Finarfin, and sister of Finrod, Felagund, king of Nargothrond. In the hearts of the exiles, they yearned for the sea, and it never went away. That was something that always stuck with them. Although in the hearts of the Grey Elves it slumbered, but once awakened it could not be peace. Doesn't that affect Legolas when he gets to when he finally sees the sea for the first time in Return of the King? Actually, I think it is when they get to Gondor, and he finally sees that sea for the first time. I think even Legolas speaks to it, and he's like, "Oh, now this is awakened in me, and it's never gonna go away." And he just is kind of, it's the thing that he just waits on until he can finally go away. Which I love that part. I think it might have been the previous episode or the episode before where we talked about how we never know for sure, but everyone sort of assumes that Gimli got to go with Legolas when Legolas decided to leave and travel across the sea to the Undying Lands. I like to think that Gimli was allowed to go, the one dwarf out of all of them, which is really a cool concept. Now we get into men, and Westron was known as the mannish speech, although it said it was enriched and softened under elvish influence. We get a little bit of mention here of the Atani or Adane, who are known as the fathers of men, which are the three houses of elf friends who came west into Beleriand during the First Age and joined against Morgoth in the War of the Great Jewels, which is, by the way, Silmarillion is coming soon, so stay tuned for that. It says here, it was granted as a reward to the elf friends that they might also, like the Eldar, pass west over the sea, but since the Undying Realm was forbidden to them, they were given the island of Numenor. Fair of face and tall, their lifespan was thrice that of men of Middle-earth, known as the Númenóreans. They were the kings of men whom the Elves called the Dunedain. And it says, alone of all the races of men, they were the only ones who knew the language of the Elves. Or at least the Sindarin. It says men of wisdom within their group also learned Quenya. And they esteemed that. It's like the royal language, you know? But it became like this thing of only the men of high stature would know Quenya, from what I'm understanding here. In the years of power, the Númenóreans maintained many forts and havens upon the western coasts of Middle-earth because of their naval presence. And said Pelargir, of course, was the big one at the mouth of the Anduin. It says here, Adunaic was spoken, mingled with the words and languages of lesser men, and it became a common speech that was then spread among all those that had dealings with the Westerness. Until the downfall of Númenor, when Elendil led the survivors back to the northwestern shores, and there they used the common tongue in their dealing with other folk and in the government of the realm. Oh, but they enriched that common tongue with many words drawn from elven languages. Interesting. So this is, blending the language stuff with the history of the culture of people. I just don't want to focus too much on the language of these. I didn't realize how much this is going to be entwined in the two. I thought there was going to be distinctions here in this section. We get a whole breakdown of the peoples, the peoples of the upper vales of the Anduin, the Bjornings, the woodsmen of Western Mirkwood, the men of the Long Lake and of the Dale, the men of Gondor, the men of Rohan, and how they all used common speech. Although it says here, wholly alien was the speech of the wild men of Druadan Forest, as was the language of the Dudlandines. So it says here these were remnants of peoples that had dwelt in the vales of the White Mountains years and years and years and years and years ago, and their kin were the dead men of Dunharrow, and the men of Bree came from them. Oh. Of their language, nothing appears in this book other than the name Forgoil, which they gave to the Rohirrim, which means straw heads. Oh, it's amazing. Now we get to the hobbits. The hobbits of the Shire and Bree had at this time for probably 1,000 years adopted the common speech. It says there is no record of any language specific to the hobbits because they have always used the language of men among whom they lived. That's very interesting. I never thought about that. I've read these books multiple times, and there's the Sindarin, the Quenya, the language of the kings and men of old, the common tongue, but there's no Hobbit language. That's a very interesting fact, which is stated here. Although it says here in the times of Frodo, there were still some traces in local words and names resembling those in Dale and Rohan, for example, Matham and Smeal. The origin of the word hobbits seems to be forgotten, but it could have been first a name given to the Harfoots by the Fallowhides and Stoors, and worn down form of word preserved more fully in Rohan, Holbitla, or Hole Builder. That's kind of cool. And now we're on to the other races. We talk about the Ents, the Ondorim, or Inid, known to the Eldar in ancient days, and the Eldar, it says here, the Ents ascribed not their own language, but the desire for speech. Okay, the language they had was unlike all others. So we've seen that in the books, and it was beautifully done in Peter Jackson's films. Slow, sonorous, agglomerated, repetitive, and indeed long-winded, formed of a multiplicity of vowel shades and distinctions of tone and quality, which even the lore masters of the elves had not attempted to represent in writing. But the Ents only used it among themselves. Said they had no need to keep it secret because nobody could ever learn it because it was so complex. That's a cool fact. But this is an interesting thing I didn't know about until you get to hear it. It says the Ents were skilled in all languages and tongues and learned them swiftly and never forgot them. But they did prefer the languages of the Eldar, the High Elven tongue. Oh my god, this is hilarious. I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation. So one of the words they use is some of the words like Quenya, which just says Toro lila mia tumbala morna tumbaletaur lomeanor, which may be rendered forest, many shadowed deep valley, black deep valley, forested gloomy land. And which by Treebeard meant more or less, there's a black shadow in the deep dales of the forest. Oh, and then we get the orcs of the black speech. Orc is the form of the name that the other races had for this foul people. In Sindarin, it was Orc. Related was the word Uruk of the black speak. Orcs were first bred by the dark power in the north in the elder days. Had no language of their own, but took what they could of other languages and perverted them to their own liking. What's up, everybody? Commercial break here. I got to give a shout out to our guild champions. It's the highest tier membership here on YouTube. We got Ancient Entity, Crazy as Relative, and Remy D. Thanks so much for your support. And of course, to all of the members here on YouTube, thanks for keeping me on the air full time. If you do like what you see and hear on my channel, don't forget to not only like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon, but please support. Consider me your Netflix, your Hulu, your Disney Plus, or HBO, whatever you want to call it. You can do memberships here on the channel starting at $3 a month. And of course, anytime you see me live or you watch a premiere, you can do super chats and stickers on those videos and super thanks on any upload you see, which allows me to keep doing this full time and paying the bills. So from Chris and I and all of our rescue cats, we say thank you. Let's get back to the video at hand. Developed a bunch of barbarous dialects between themselves, it says here. But they used the Western tongue for communication between the different types of orcs. Now it says here the black speech was devised by Sauron in the Dark Years. And while he had desired to make it the language of all of his followers, he failed in that purpose. But it says here the black speech was the root of many of the words that were in the Third Age among the orcs, such as gash, which is fire. Trolls had their own language? Oh. It says they took language from the orcs, and stone trolls spoke a debased form of the common tongue. Then we get to dwarves. Ooh, I love this part. It says the Silmarillion tells of their strange beginning, but here it says there's no knowledge, and the lesser elves had no knowledge of this. A tough thrawn race for the most part, secretive, laborious, retentive of the memories of injuries and of benefits, lovers of stones, of gems, and things that take shapes under the hands of the craftsman. Not evil by nature, regardless of what the tales of men may have said about them. It says here, though, the reason those tales are spread because the men lusted after their gold, and the dwarves didn't want to give up their gold, so they become known as evil because there was an enmity between them, because the dwarves were like, piss off, this is our wealth, we're not going to just freely give up our stuff to you. In secret, they used their own strange tongue, changed little by the years, but it said here that it became a tongue of lore rather than a cradle speech, and they guarded it like a treasure of the past, and few of any of the other races ever learned how to speak it. Very interesting. There's a whole section on translation here, which is noticed that the hobbits such as Frodo and other persons such as Gandalf and Aragorn do not always use the same style, which is intentional. It says the more learned and able among the hobbits had knowledge of book language, as it was termed in the Shire. Ew. All right. I honestly think this is the end. I'm scrolling forward here real quick. to make sure. But I think that's all we wanted to cover, which is some of the basics of the language and the races here. Oh yeah, now we're to the index. So we are officially done with the appendices. This is going to be a shorter episode, everybody. Mary, you're being obnoxious. Anyway, everybody, we're to the end. So, hopefully you've enjoyed it to this point. We have done the original works of J.R.R. Tolkien now, after all these episodes, in a year and a half or so of this. And we will do the Silmarillion next. Like I said, there may be a short break. I'll let you guys know next week. I might decide to take the rest of June off and then start the Silmarillion in July. It might be nice to take a couple weeks off. I will confirm next week, but we might do like a recap episode and sort of a looking ahead to what's coming down the pipeline. Thanks everybody who's been following along. Hopefully it's been entertaining for you. I would like to say thanks to those of you who have been supporting with super chats and everything else, because I think this series in particular, we get a lot of super chats on the live streams and stuff when I'm playing games, but this series in particular is this series has seen more super thanks on the uploads than any other series that I do here on YouTube. So I really appreciate those of you who contribute and support the channel in that way, because it keeps me going. It always brings a smile to my face to see someone who's like, hey, thank you. And so I appreciate that. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. It's all good support, however you choose to support. We'll see you in the next episode. Stay safe out there. It's the hot season right now. Don't do anything crazy out there in the heat. It's better to stay inside when it's hot and read a good book. So hopefully you'll be ready to dive into the Silmarillion with me when we get to that. But in the meantime, that's the end of this episode. That's the end of the Lord of the Rings, everybody. That's the end of the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings books that were written during Tolkien's lifetime. And anything we cover after this point is stuff that was published after his passing. So, yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you in the next one.